Yeah, sorry. Okay, I will share my screen. Let's do that. Can everyone hear me? I mean, you've all got your microphones off and things like that, but I'm assuming you can. Cool. Can you see a little bat on the screen? Yeah, I'm assuming you can. Cool.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great. So yeah, tonight I'll be talking to you about my what I call the Big Bat Year. So in 2019, I went all around the world to see as many bats as I could. I did see quite a few. I'm not going to talk about all of them because, I mean, unless you don't have anything to do for the next 5 days, it will take a while. So this is just a little overview of some of the bats I have seen and where I've seen them. So let's make this work. Cool. So here are some significant numbers. So I've seen seen and heard just shy of 400 bat species. Of those, I've managed to photograph just shy of 149, and I have recordings of 259 species. You can see that a lot of those numbers are just shy of like a significant 100 or 50. It's not just by the lack of trying. I did try to reach those milestones. It's just really bloody hard. So I visited 29 countries, which is a lot to do in a year. And I did some birding along the way. Well, some birding because I still got 2,000 species. It's not bad. Here's a little map of all the places I've been to. So it gives you an idea of the coverage I've managed to achieve during that year. Obviously, it would have been a lot harder to do such coverage in 2020 for obvious reasons. So I'm glad I did that last year. So because you lot have a really cool urban bat project, I thought I would talk to you about some of the bats that live in other cities that you might not be too familiar with. Let's kick off with this one. Not sure how many of you would actually be able to recognize it. It is in Africa. It is the capital of Madagascar, Antananarivo. Tana in short, because that word just has way too many syllables. Even the locals call it Tana, so yeah. But the reason I mention it is because so Madagascar has a lot of endemic species, has all the lemurs, got a lot of chameleons, things like that, but also has a number of endemic bats. One of them is the Otonops madagascariensis. Not entirely sure what the common name is, but it's one of the free-flying bats, one of the long ones with the really high-flying ones. There's a picture just here. It's not the prettiest bat, but it is surprisingly common above the capital city. Elsewhere in the country, it's actually really hard to find. So it was a nice surprise to find them in the capital. And it's quite nice because you can actually hear them just with the naked ear. You don't need a recorder. Obviously, a recorder is better, but that's how I realized that there were bats above my head, even though I was in the middle of a very smelly city. It smells a lot like fumes that shouldn't be coming out of cars. So here's another example of some urban bats. Now, very different part of the world as well. Here we are in Cairns, in northern Queensland, Australia. This is the well-known spectacular flying fox colony in Cairns. So the library would be just behind me, filming that. Just behind the fountain on the left, actually, is the library. And those trees are just full of bats. The local people don't really like them, but there's a decent amount of pressure from conservation groups to try to keep them there. those haven't really been successful in the past year or so. So I'm not entirely sure whether they've been chased away this year or not. I heard there was some talks of the authorities doing so. Here's another flying fox in another Pacific island. It's in Fiji. So this little flying fox is the Tonga flying fox, which has a very stupid name because it's present in a lot of islands and Tonga is only one of them. So it doesn't really make sense to call it that. But anyway, that's common names for you. And this cute little guy, I think it's a guy, it is a guy, so I photographed him above the presidential compound in the capital of Fiji. Now, the nice thing about the presidential compound is that it's a relatively well protected area, because if you enter, you get shot because it's Fiji. So the flying foxes are actually protected there, not because they're flying foxes, just because they happen to choose the right trees to roost in. And that is the only level of protection they get in Fiji. So good choice for those guys to, well, good thing that they chose to roost there and not in the forest. Now, I have visited ancient cities as well. So this is a Mayan city, if you can call them city, but I guess they still qualify as urban bats. But while a lot of people go there to look at some nice old rocks that have weird shapes that they've been given by people who died a long time ago, I wasn't there for that. I was there for these guys. So this is another of those high-flying species. This is Nyctinomops laticotatus, if I'm not mistaken. And they just live inside the cracks in the ruins. Obviously, there's a lot of bats that use cracks in ruins, but those ones are quite unusual in that normally they would roost high up in trees because while they are very good flyers in open habitat, they're not very maneuverable. So they're built to fly high and fast. But if you take off from, let's say, 2 meters above the ground, you do need a fair amount of agility to be able to swoop back up and then do your thing up there. So that's why they usually roost high up in trees, because then they can just drop out of the tree and then go back up. There's not that much risk of hitting shrubs or just the ground, because if they drop on the ground, they can't really take off again. So this is unusual because they were roosting, I'm assuming you can see my mouse, but they were roosting right there. So they were able to swoop out, but just because this is open because of how the ruin was designed. What I don't know is whether these bats were present when the Mayan were using those buildings. I have checked some illustrations by the Mayans of bats, and there are quite a few, but they usually phallostamids, of which vampires are part, and those have been widely illustrated by Mayans, but I haven't seen any evidence of Nyctinomops or similar species illustrated by them. So perhaps they only came in when the Mayans had abandoned those ruins for whatever reason. Here's some more flying foxy looking things. So here we're in Africa, in Kenya actually, in Mombasa. So this is a very large roost of straw-colored fruit bats. So they are the most numerous migrating mammal on Earth, I believe. I believe that's the record they hold. It's a very specific one. I believe that's the one. Don't quote me on that though. But anyway, it's a very impressive transcontinental. Transcontinent? No, because it stays in the same continent. Well, it flies from one end of the continent to the other. That's what you need to remember. But not all individuals do that. And actually the population in Mombasa is fairly resident, which is interesting. So numbers vary within the year, but it's not like they all disappear when the rest of the population is in Zambia. So that's a really cute bat, and I'm sure a lot of you would love to see one of those in an urban cave. So this is actually an urban cave. So this is a touristic cave at the edge of the city of Pokhara in Nepal, which is the second largest city in Nepal. But there's a few caves just outside the city center. So it's quite surprising to see cool bats in there. But this is the Cineraceous leaf-nosed bat. So it's part of the Hippocidorus genus, the leaf-nosed bat, the old world leaf-nosed bats, because they've got a little flat nose that has a variable number of leaves depending on the species. Those leaves have a major function in the collocation, just like our horseshoe bats. Yeah, just like them. Now the exact function of each leaflet or bit of all the organs that they have on their nose isn't understood yet, but the complexity of their nose makes us believe that there must be a function for each and every part of that nose. So this is actually a really tiny bat. It's a little bit bigger than a little horseshoe bat, so about this size. It's really tiny. It's a very poorly known species in Nepal. Now, normally I don't really like taking pictures in caves with a flash because I think, well, it's not that I think, but it is disturbing for bats. But in this case, I did actually spend quite some time trying to get good shots, just because there's so few pictures of those of that particular species. And because it lives in a cave near people, I thought it was important to have good visuals just to show people, because if you want to convince people to protect a cave, you have to show them pictures of what's inside. Because if you just give them that barbaric Latin name, well, they won't be interested at all. So I thought it was worth it for the bats, not just for me. So here's my bat. Now, sadly, that little guy called Kiwi has decided to spend the rest of his life in Costa Rica. Well, I might have forced him to do so. Well, I forgot it. Basically, he's no longer with us. He's got a little friend now. Well, they haven't met, but I replaced him. Anyway, the reason I'm showing you this picture is because it's a very weird phenomenon that seems to be fairly specific to the Belgian coast. So I did spend some time in Belgium during my big bat year. So below that balcony there's a little blob, and that's actually an Nethusius pipistrelle. We have discovered that a number of Nethusius pipistrelles, as well as some particular bats, use our very ugly buildings on our coast to roost there during the day on migration. They will actually often spend more than one day roosting on those buildings. And I have been part of a small team doing some surveys of just checking where the bats were roosting, how long they were staying, things like that. I actually just came back yesterday from a 2-day survey, and I did find one bat that stayed 2 days in the exact same spot. But the weather right now on the coast is extremely windy and extremely rainy, so can't blame it for roosting on the balcony where it's dry and sheltered. And then here's another urban bat project from Australia, from a researcher called Vanessa, and she's working on what are they called again? Bentwing bats. That's the eastern bentwing bat, and she's checking out culverts and looking at population dynamics in culverts in Brisbane, Australia. Now here's another rarely photographed bat. I was in High Andes in Ecuador, but some local people told me that there were some bats in an abandoned building somewhere. So they just took me there, and then I realized there was actually fairly rare myotis, which was really cool. Because identifying myotis species is hard, so identifying them based on echolocation is hard everywhere, but obviously when you're in poorly studied regions, it's even harder. So seeing them just to make sure that they were actually Oxyotus was cool. I also managed to get some reference calls for that species. Now, sadly, not all urban bats have chosen to be urban bats. Some of them have been brought in by force, and I like talking about those bats in my talks just because they don't get a lot of coverage. I mean, obviously the research into the origin of COVID pandemic has led to some images and some dubious reports coming out in the press. But bat trade is a lot more than bats being sold for food. So in this case, this is in Jakarta, Indonesia, so the capital city. There's quite a few markets that sell hundreds of species of birds. If you are a birder, it is extremely depressing to see more bird species on the market that you would be able to see if you were to spend, I don't know, 10 days actually birding in the forest. It's crazy the number of species they have in teeny weeny cages. So they've got pitas in a cage that's about the size of the pita. Pitas, for the non-birders, are birds are very hard to see, but are very colorful. So really well sought after by birders. So yeah, this little guy is a giant flying fox in a cage that's obviously too small because he can't even hang properly. And those bats were sold for basically nothing. It was £1.50 or something. And the buyer could just choose whether they were going to eat them or keep them as a pet. And I thought it was just super sad to see that. And there were a few sellers for these guys. And I kept asking whether I could take pictures because I hadn't seen many pictures of bats on such a large market. And eventually one did say yes. Took some convincing, but I got my picture. And I think I got a fairly emotional picture that I can show to people. And obviously I didn't spend all my time in cities. It was easy and convenient to find bats in cities because I always had to spend time in cities. Just, you know, when you're transferring from one country to the other, you don't always get to choose the timing of your flight, and then it's inconvenient to go to the jungle immediately. And sometimes I needed to rest as well. So it was really cool to be able to still ramp up the numbers, of bat species without actually having to leave the city. But obviously, jungles are a bit better. So here's one cool jungle. So this is the forest in the mountains in West Papua. So a really underexplored region. So underexplored that it actually only took me about an hour to find a new species to science. Sadly, because of all the issues getting permits and things like that, I don't think it'll ever get described. And I know of 4 or 5 more undescribed species of bats in Indonesia that probably will remain so for the exact same reasons. So that's a bit of a shame, but sadly, that's what it is. Here's another very nice view from New Caledonia, which is technically part of France. Now, I wanted to go to that particular spot because I'd read about an extremely rare long-eared bat species. Now, long-eared, it's not a Plicotus like ours, it's a Nyctophilus. It's basically like a Plicotus, but it has short ears, so it's not really a long-eared. It's like a medium long-eared. It's not as catchy. But yeah, so the one I was looking for was Nyctophilus nebulosus. It's an endemic to New Caledonia. It is considered as critically endangered. There were no sightings since 2002, and now there's one in 2019. Man. So I also managed to get the very first sound recordings for that species, which is good because that means that we can actually survey the whole island by putting audio moths or whatever in various places and try to figure out how rare or not rare that species actually is. So that's, I guess, good news for that species, but it was really cool to find a presumed extinct species. That was not exactly expected. I tried for it and I succeeded, which was really cool. Now there's some not at all rare species that I also wanted to see. So this is the Sulawesi flying fox, found as the name this time actually suggests on Sulawesi in Indonesia. Unfortunately, that species has become less common than it used to be. Sulawesi is actually a very interesting place to study conservation challenges and what actually goes into and studying the things that can impact conservation. So in this case, religion. So the north of Sulawesi is mainly Christian. The south is mainly Muslim. Muslims can't eat bats. So unsurprisingly, bats are doing much better in the south than they are in the north. So while that species should be present on the whole island, in the far north, it is extremely rare. So in the south, it's quite common, and this picture was taken in a village that actually invites tourists that are on their way to a famous waterfall. They invite them there for a very small fee to show them the bats, and those bats might be the only flying foxes those people will ever see. So it's a really cool ecotourism opportunity that I really enjoyed learning about. This might be familiar to you. This is another good example of bat ecotourism. It is Bracken Cave in Texas. It is home to a mere 10 to 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats. It was an extraordinary experience. If you are ever in Texas, I highly recommend it. Now I had the huge chance and honor of being led on a private tour by Merlin Tuttle, who was part of the team who bought the place a while ago. I can't remember when, but a while ago. And it was great to just spend the evening with him, hearing his stories about how that came to be. And obviously the show is quite something. It's a constant flow of bats. You don't even see all of them because it gets dark, and unless you shine the light, you don't see the rest. You hear them and you notice them because suddenly all the mosquitoes are just gone. So they annoy you before the bats come out, and then it's gone. So it's pretty cool. It's a very effective mosquito repellent, apparently. So all you need is 10 million bats. That's it. No DEET, just 10 million bats. So here's another rarely photographed species. I do have quite a lot of those, which is really, really exciting, I think. This is the Temminck's flying fox. Again, in Indonesia. I did spend a lot of time in Indonesia. I spent a month in total, which is the longest I've spent in any country that year. So I actually had never seen a picture of Temminck's before. All I had to identify it was a paper that said that the locals knew the local flying foxes as the red one, the black one, the white one. The red and black I did find quite easily, and then the white one I was looking for white-ish flying foxes, but then I thought to myself, how white can a flying fox be? Because it's not going to be polar bear white, but how white can they be? And then that thing just decided to perch in a tree not too far from me. I realized, oh, that must be Temminck's. So now I've got a picture that I can show people. So this, if you ever on Seram in Indonesia, you see that, it's Temminck's. This cute little guy is one of the vampire bats. It's the hairy-legged vampire bat that's taken in Mexico. It's a vampire bat that specializes on birds and small mammals. So all three vampire bats, they don't really eat the same thing. So the common vampire bat is mostly feeds on large mammals, including sometimes humans, but mostly cows, realistically. Then there's this guy, super cute with that little big nose. It's really cute. Feeds on small mammals and birds. And then there's the white-winged that almost entirely specializes on birds. But the last two are quite rare. The common vampire bat is only common where it is common because of the presence of cows, where there are no cows at all. So if you are in pristine rainforest, it will be extremely rare because its prey is rare. There aren't that many large mammals in the neotropics. It's not like Africa or something. Speaking of Africa, here's a bat that has a really easy to remember common name. It's just the yellow wing bat because it's got yellow wings. Now, there are a lot of things that are yellow on that bat. It's not just the wings. It's basically everything that's not fur. It's a carnivorous bat. Now, it's not going to eat an elephant, but it will eat small reptiles, small mammals, probably amphibians, but it doesn't really, I don't think there's too many amphibians there, but as well as relatively large insects. And it hunts a bit like a Placotus, so it will just hang there, listen for stuff, well, listen for possible prey to make some noise, and then just swoop and get it. This one was nice enough to just stay there for me to run back to my hotel room, which had a stupid lock. Took me, it felt like 10 years, but it probably wasn't, to open, get my camera, run back, and it was still there, so it's great. And I got some nice recordings as well, which there aren't too many of, so always good to get some of the useful recordings. Now, this one, this is a brown long-eared, taken in a church in the Netherlands. I would have liked to go in a church in Belgium. It just didn't happen. There were surveys in the Netherlands. I just joined those. I speak mostly their language. Now they have an accent that I don't understand, but at least I knew where the bats were. So yeah. Is that about bee condition? Oh, sorry. Shouldn't be looking at the chat. This is a disc wing bat. So it's called disc wing because it's got a little disc on its thumb that allows it to stick to the side, to the inside of, in this case, a rolled up leaf. So a few plants, including bananas, will have a leaf that comes out and then unrolls like that. And those bats, they use those leaves in the very short amount of time that the leaf is open enough that they can fit, but not too open that they are exposed to predators or wind or whatever. So they only get about a couple of days of roost out of every leaf, and then they just have to move. And that's what they do. They just live in, oh, sorry about that. They roost in those leaves, and I had to check a lot of those leaves in the southern Peru to find those. But it was really cool when we found them, because you just, you peek inside every leaf, every cone, and then suddenly it's like, oh, there's actually bats in those. So that's pretty cool. Another leaf roosting species is the Honduran white bat. Yes, that was tricolor, Scott. So they're super cute. So they're completely white. They're tiny fluff balls like that are white, and the bare parts are bright yellow. They roost under leaves. Now this leaf was actually it was about 50 centimeters off the ground. And that was one of my target species in Costa Rica. It was actually my Christmas present in a way, and one of the last species I got that year. And because I've got a tiny bit more time, I will talk about some things that aren't bats, because obviously I saw a lot more than just bats. And I didn't want to go on a world tour just looking at bats. That just felt like I mean, as much as I love bats, I just had to look at some at other things. Obviously, I couldn't look at everything because that would have just been crazy. But I did enjoy some other species as well. So here's a scorpion in Mexico. For those who don't know, scorpions are so the outer shell is reactive to UV light. So if you walk around with a UV torch, you will find them very easily because they will glow. This one was black, but if you shine a UV light on it, it's white-ish. Apparently, different species have slightly different colors when exposed to UV light. So that's really interesting. It's something someone said during one of my talks. So that was great. So this is obviously chameleon. I couldn't go to Madagascar without having a look at chameleons, lemurs as well. Sadly, I didn't include any pictures of lemurs this time, but I did see a few cool lemurs. Did see a few cool snakes. Did try to stay away from them because I know nothing about snakes. I don't know how to handle them. I don't know how to handle myself when there's a snake. So I just prefer to stay far away from the snakes. This one was, we found with a guy who knows everything about snakes, or basically everything. That was in Peru, in southern Peru. Yeah, we had been told that there was a snake, a boa, sleeping on top of the batteries at the top of a weather tower. This is actually 40 meters above the ground, so it is above the canopy. It gives you an amazing view. It's great for birding. Terrible if you are afraid of heights, which I am, so it took a lot for me to get up there. But that snake was a pretty cool find. Apparently, it was coming up there regularly to just sleep on the warm batteries. It's weird that they would just come up 40 meters to sleep, but whatever works for them. We're still in Peru. We're just a few hundred meters from that tower. This is a brown titty monkey. They're super cute, tiny monkeys from South America. It was nice to have a visit from them around the camp. Sorry. He's a non-monkey. So this is a starship from northern Sulawesi, in the area where there's no bats left, but the people there don't eat those things. So they're doing pretty well, and they're a popular attraction for tourists as well. So they've got huge eyes. So the eyes take about, I think both of them combined take about 80% of the volume of the skull, which is insane. But obviously that allows them to see at night. They look like they can see sound or something. But so they're carnivores. They will hunt mainly insects, but they won't say no to a small reptile or an amphibian. And they just grab them with their long fingers, but they hunt by sight at night. And during the day, they roost in trees. So this is a tree roost from which it had just come out. So here's kiwi, late kiwi, and then a couple of lions in Kenya. Obviously, when I was in Kenya, I had to try to see some of the large mammals that are iconic to Africa. It wasn't my first time in Africa, but I thought I'd try to see some I hadn't seen yet. I ended up seeing cheetah, which I hadn't seen in South Africa a few years ago. Some birds as well. This is the beautiful Inca tern from the Pacific coast of South America. It's just a gorgeous bird. I was so happy to see it. I went on a boat trip. I was supposedly to swim with seals or something. I didn't swim with them. I just took pictures, but it was insane. Here's another bird from South America. This is the oil bird. So if you are familiar with a nightjar, this looks superficially like a nightjar, but it's about this size. Okay, wingspan is huge. It's about the wingspan of a buzzard. It's an extremely loud animal. I had a few people telling me about the time when they caught one in the net, and they thought it was extremely loud. And then I told them, well, I was in a cave with 20 of them, and it just was ridiculously loud. But the nice thing about those, so as I said, they live in caves, is that they are one of the few birds capable of echolocation. And I thought, you know, I'm on a big bat year, might as well look at other things that echolocate. And this is a really cool one. And also, unlike the nightjars, this thing eats fruit. So it looks like a nightjar that's grown a lot, like it's eaten some mushrooms, and then just decided to go completely bonkers with every other aspect of its ecology. He's a much nicer looking bird. This is a trogon. I can't remember which one because they are quite tricky to tell apart. But this guy was just perching 50 centimeters from my window. This is taken with my smartphone, by the way, just outside the window of my bedroom. So my bed was maybe a meter away. So that was a nice sight when I woke up one day. This is in the high Andes in Ecuador. And it's just a gorgeous bird. And it's so cool to see them just so close. It wasn't shy at all. So thank you very much. And I just have way too many pictures of Kiwi in that presentation. It's actually, it hurts a bit because, well, it wasn't nice to lose him. But anyway, it's nice to honor his memory. So as Morgan said, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat or just ask me directly. That's up to you. Well, thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that little sneak peek into what I've been up to in 2019. Thank you very much. I did see a few questions.
Yes, we've got some questions. Nils, first, thank you very much. That was just so cool and just so amazing to see such wonderful images. That was just really, really cool. Yeah, we're getting some messages saying thank you. That was amazing. And that was awesome. Thanks, Nils. But if I can get away with getting my questions in first before I ask anybody else's. First of all, what's your camera?
My camera is a Nikon D500 with a fixed 300 f4 lens.
Okay. Cool.
And that's the only camera and lens I traveled with. Yeah, just awesome. Because I didn't want to take more because it was added weight. I only traveled with a cabin luggage, so that was a limiting factor as well. Well, it was limiting in terms of what I could bring with me. It wasn't limiting in terms of what flights I could get on, things like that, and the speed of the transfers. It's just way better to travel only with cabin luggage.
Yeah, I totally agree. I use just the same very small camera to take with me everywhere. My second question basically is that through all of your travels that you have done, then did you see most of the species through relatively accessible means, or did you go out with researchers to do like trapping surveys and things like that, or if someone had the energy, first of all, and the finances and the wherewithal, could they do what you did, or would they need special contacts to be able to replicate your trip?
So I didn't actually have any special contacts prior to that, because while I knew a few bat workers here and there, I was still starting in my bat working career, so I wasn't really well known, so I couldn't really use my connections that much. But obviously, people I talked to about my project in various places around the world, they were excited. So a lot of them really wanted to take me in the field, but because of how my big bat year was set up, I couldn't just move everything around based on people's availabilities to take me in the field. So sometimes it just didn't work out, and actually most of the time it didn't work out. So while I could have gone out with researchers, I just couldn't do it at the dates I was in the country or in the region.
Right.
So I ended up doing a lot of stuff on my own or with non-bat people. So I did a few things with bird guides, just because in some regions it's hard to just go around and not get lost. And a lot of birding happens at night anyway, so it was fine to combine both. And actually a few bird guides were really happy to learn about bats with me, so that was quite nice.
Cool.
So yeah, I guess people could do the same, and I do want people to do the same. but it is very
like
challenging.
a year off work and we'll all be fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's not that much. Yeah, no,
right, I'm going to start going through the questions people have put in the chat. If anybody wants to ask a question in person, please raise your hand on the digitally raise your hand. Don't just sit there like this, just like we did earlier. So Lee has asked a question. What prompted you to do your big bat year?
So as I might have said, I have been a birder for a while, and obviously I'd heard of some people doing big years. This is my Dutch friend this is his book that he wrote. He's the current record holder for a bird big year, so seeing as many bird species in a year. And I was just chatting with them, and then someone as a joke commented on a Facebook post saying, "Hey Nils, you should do a big bat year." And I took that seriously, and here I am. No, but seriously, I understood the power that such a journey could have in terms of how many people or how much attention it draws. And I thought it was a great opportunity to talk about bats to people who would normally be interested in bats, mainly birders. So taking their idea and putting using it with bats was actually a good way to attract a lot of birders' attention to bats. And I know of quite a few birders who are now into bats thanks to my big bat year, which is really cool.
That is really great. So did you already have an existing interest in bats, or have you just discovered bats because of the dare, so to speak?
No, I was already really into bats. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. I had been working with bats for 4 or 5 years before. 5, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Scott. Scott, a question?
Did you get grey, long-eared, and alcathoe?
Grey, yes, I got it in a church as well, in the same church as brown. And I did get alcathoe as well with a recorder in Belgium, yeah.
Did you count bats that you only saw and not heard, like a birder would?
So I counted bats that
that you only heard and not saw.
Yes, I did, because in other cases, I mean, I could have spotlighted the bat just to say I saw it, but in a lot of cases, it doesn't really add any information to the identification. So I thought it was pointless disturbance. So I was happy with the recording as long as it was identified beyond reasonable doubt. That was.
I think that's the way that it generally works with big years for birds, isn't it?
Yeah.
If it's unmistakably identifiable as that species, and they get to count it.
Yeah, I had some people criticize my idea because they said, well, you haven't actually heard the bat, you've heard a processed processed recording of, but I was like, well, it's the only way you're gonna hear the bloody bat. So.
Right, I've got a question from. Oh, sorry, Scott. Carry on.
I was going to say, I just didn't think you could accurately identify alcathoe on a recording because they're so close to whiskered brants.
Well, in some cases you can. And I was lucky actually to get a decent recording, because I know of a location where they're regular, and I just went there and just stayed until there was one. Yeah.
Okay.
Got a question from Matt. Have you noticed people's perceptions of bats change due to COVID-19?
I don't have any first-hand information on that, because the people I've stayed in touch with are bat people, and their perception hasn't changed. I expect it's the general public's perception that has changed. And I don't have any first-hand experience after COVID-19. So I was there, I was doing my world tour in 2019, so before that. But I have heard of people persecuting bats in a lot of places around the world. So it definitely has had an impact, not a good one.
I think that we've had quite, even just here during COVID here, we've had times when sorry, I've got to mute people. Mute. It's literally not working. Okay. We've had times here when we've been doing Bats Live sort of broadcasts, and Scott had a time when he was doing a Bats Live broadcast, and people walked up to him and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Bats Live," and they're like, "Oh, coronavirus." Like, it's the misinformation is so pervasive. Bear with me a moment. I'm just going to see everybody. Okay, Scott, you still have your hand raised. Do you have another question? No. Okay. So Chris has asked, is that bat in peak condition? Chris, I'm not sure what bat you're referring to. I think it was either the brown long-eared or the disc-winged bat.
I think that message came up when
it was the brown long-eared
was on the screen.
Possibly yellow-winged bat, that kind of bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It was the brown long-eared.
Okay.
So I'm just scrolling through looking to see.
So there's one from Alex.
Yes, one from Alex. How did you select each location to visit? How did you, Alex? This is 4 questions.
It's fine. I can probably answer most of them in
how did you select each
relatively short
location
answer.
Yeah. How did you select each location? How did you find out about local opportunities to see local bats for a casual traveler? Do you have any recommendations on which books to get for global bats? And also, thank you very much. Awesome talk.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you, Morgan, for reading the question. So how I initially went about organizing my trip was getting trip reports from mammal watching trips that I found out after were sometimes of dubious reliability. And I also combined that with just the species richness of the countries around the world. I actually made an R script that would take the IUCN lists per country and then just get me an itinerary based on that. I quickly realized that it was more important to find places where I could actually talk to people and even go in the field with people, because that would get me more bats than if I was on my own in a species-rich area. Mm-hmm. So I'd say that's the first thing, is to try to find a place where there's already people working with bats. Now, for the casual travelers, there are quite a few opportunities in various places around the world. They're rarely cheap though. But I don't want to be too specific now because it would take quite a while, but you can send me an email if you want more details about that, or if you have countries you'd like to go to, I could give you tips for those countries. Which books to get for global bats? Honestly, I mean, there's so many books. I've got them all down there. Well, not all, obviously, but I've got a lot. And when you do a world tour, you can't just travel with all of the books. Now, this thing came out when I was back from my world tour.
It's only 145 quid.
It's a huge book. It is not one you want to travel with just because it's so expensive and so nice. You just want to leave it and never touch it again. No, but honestly, what I found was there's very few areas that are well covered by books, and most of the information available will be in scientific publications, which is a pain because you have to go through a lot of them to get any sort of reasonable amount of information. But sadly, that's what it is in the current state of things. Yeah.
I'd imagine that the language is an issue as well.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah.
That you can only get local textbooks in the local language. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Farah says, did you have any accessibility issues when surveying for bats due to people's perceptions, beliefs, and cultures? Actually,
no. I was actually really surprised. So it's important to understand that most people around the world don't care about bats. So the common attitude of being scared of bats is very Europe-centric. Well, Europe and its main former colonies, mainly the US and Australia. When you go to Africa, Indonesia, South America, they're mostly indifferent to bats, sometimes to the extent that they are like any other animal that you can eat. But it's not that they hate them. So when you go, one thing, yeah, one good travel tip that also answered this question is if you are in a random village in a somewhat hilly area, if you ask people to show you a cave, they will be super happy to show you a cave. So I did that in a lot of places where I had no idea where to go. I was just like, well, is there a cave somewhere? Because local people will know of local caves. They won't know what bats are in there, but they will know of the caves, and then they could take you, and then you can do your own work to ID the bats. But it's a really nice way to bond with people, as well as just learning more about their perception of bats as well. Because usually, if you say that you are actually interested in the bats in the cave, things like that, they will usually ask you why you like bats. Yeah.
Okay. Cecilia has said, how did you go about identifying bats acoustically in countries where many calls have not yet been documented and described, and was this a challenging process?
Yeah, it was extremely challenging, and I have a lot of unidentified calls that I am keeping because they might end up being identified at some point. But I basically tried to find someone who had extensive experience in each country. It was reasonably doable. Now, in Asia, there's actually a surprising amount of literature on acoustics, because there's quite a lot of people doing so. Now, obviously, all my identifications can't be correct, because that is just impossible. I did try to be fairly conservative before identifying a species, for sure, especially if it was a new one. But there might be a few mistakes in there. But it was just, a matter of collecting and collating all the information available in the literature, as well as just talking to people about everything that's not published. It was extremely tricky. Yeah, it was a lot easier when I could just go out in the field with someone who had 10 years experience with sound recordings. That did make things a lot easier. Yeah.
So
but even then, I did that in Taiwan, and the guy I did fieldwork with, he was really happy that I got barber style and plicotus, because he had very few recordings of those species. Yeah.
So after the fact, have you sent any recordings to experts to then add to your list after your trip is over?
No, usually I kept up with the IDs as I went along. Yeah, I didn't have too much backlog. I did send a few recordings afterwards, like the plicotus, the barber style in Taiwan, just because he was interested in my calls. I sent a yellow-winged in Kenya as well, things like that.
Cool. Tracy, who I haven't seen in forever. Hi, Tracy. Tracy has asked, when you went to Bracken Cave, did you visit the Congress Avenue Bridge? I've been there. It's pretty awesome. Did you go there too?
So I was there mid-June, and there aren't that many bats coming out of the bridge mid-June. I only spent 3 nights in Texas. One of them was for Bracken. So no, I did not visit the bridge. Well, I was nearby, and I got recordings of Mexican free-tailed in the city above the river, but I didn't really see a huge emergence from the bridge. I heard them during the day, but it wasn't what you can see in August. Yeah, August, September. It's much better time. Yeah.
I was there 4 years ago tonight.
Yeah, it looks amazing, and I kind of want to go back, but also it's the USA, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Pretty much everybody wants to know if they can come with you next time you do this.
Well, as I said, my suitcase. Well, I didn't have a suitcase, so you can't hide in there. But sure, I mean, if people want to go on a trip with me, I'd be happy to organize something. But obviously, that won't be before a while. So check back in a couple of years, probably.
Right. So there's another question from Lou, which is a great question. If you could only go back to one location, which one would it be and why?
The Solomon Islands.
No hesitation.
No, no. I started reading the question. I was like, Solomon Islands. So I had a few cool bat species from there, but it's probably the location where I missed most species, despite trying. And there's just such cool species, and I don't know, I really like. I mean, they've got loads of really cool flying foxes. They also have the monkey-faced bats, that are apparently really cool. Like if you actually handle them, they're pandas. So you can even go and pick them up in the roost. They just don't bite. So it's actually like picking up a teddy bear,
Oh, wow.
which is incredible. So, I mean, yeah, there's so many cool species that I haven't seen, and it's such a great country. I love the people there. Yeah, the family I was staying with was super cool. The kids were so stoked to try my binoculars because they could watch the island that was in front of theirs. I mean, they knew the island because they see it every day.
Yeah.
They just didn't know there was a house on it. So the first kid who took my binoculars was like, "Oh, there's a house," and then the other brothers were like, "No, there's no house." And then they all looked, and yes, there was a house, but they just had never used binoculars before, so they had no idea there was a house just in front of them. It was just great.
I find it quite interesting that your immediate answer to the place you want to go back to is because of your human experience, not because of your bat experience.
I mean, when you do something like that, it's extremely challenging and it's extremely draining as well. Being alone all the time is draining. So as much as I mean, I didn't expect that the human aspect would be so important, but I mean, honestly, it just made things a lot better. Like in Nepal, I was with two really great bat people. We didn't see that many bats, but I had such a great time because those were two people about my age who are just amazing bat workers. And just the three of us just looking for stuff was really cool. We missed loads, but whatever. Yeah.
Right. Well, we are out of time. And we're also out of questions, so that was good timing.
I just answered to Cecilia, who's asked me what I would do differently if I did it again. The answer is I won't do it again.
Oh, yeah, I see.
No, but I would probably put the emphasis on human contact and finding bat workers from the very beginning, because it's something I learned along the way. And obviously, if I were to do it again now with the huge network of contacts I have, would be just way easier. So yeah, there's so many things I would do differently, but I don't want to think about that too much because then I tend to think that I sort of failed in what I've done. But yeah, that's just my brain. Yeah.
Any more big years coming up?
I don't think so.
Just checking you aren't going to do snakes or anything, you know.
Oh yeah, we did miss a question. Did you have to handle any bats to confirm ID?
Yeah,
yes. So I did handle bats whenever allowed and whenever reasonably feasible.
Did any require? I think she's asking if any required handling in order to confirm your identification.
So most of the time, if I saw a bat, it didn't. In a few cases, it did, and then we, depending on the situation and the stakes. So if it was between two common species, then I just didn't care. I was like, it's not worth disturbing the bat just to add a name on my list. But if it was between a data deficient species and a common species, yes, I did catch it. Just to make sure, and in that case, it was actually the data deficient one. So it was important. Every record counts when you only have a dozen or so records. Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, can I just say a huge thank you from all of us. We're all just like just beyond jealous that you've gotten to do this. Can we do a round of applause by raising hands digitally rather than just making?
You can actually send reactions, like you can send applause.
Okay, do it. Yeah. Send applause. Just go crazy.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you.
So what we're going to do is I'm going to stop recording now, and then we are going to take a 10-minute break, and then come back for the AGM. Any members are welcome to stay for the AGM and see what we get onto. There's not going to be any cute pictures of vampire bats for sure, but and there's not even cake this year, so I got nothing to bribe you with. But there you go. Oh wait, before anybody goes, I have a thing. Every year, we have a volunteer of the year. And we announced it at the AGM, and I thought it'd be better to do it now, while this person was possibly still online. So bear with me, and I will reveal. The certificate does not have any signatures on it because of COVID, and we've not been able to get things around to people. But let me announce that the volunteer of the year is Dun, 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 dun.
Joe.
Can we see it?
Yay!
Yeah.
Yay! For your absolute tireless dedication this year, Lee Yates, thank you so much for everything you have done. You are Volunteer of the Year 2020.
Yay, Lee!
Whee, well done.
Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed.
Okay, now a break,
I'll
everybody.
just turn my video off now because I think I've gone very red.
Come back for the AGM.
So well deserved, Lee.
We come back for the AGM at 20 past, please. So you have 11 minutes. To get
Okay,
here.
11 minutes.
All right.
And counting.
Thank you. I'll be back.
Or come back, whatever, you know. Like. Nils, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to be sending you an email. I'm going to stop recording. Hold on a minute. So, Nils, I will. Yes.